Greetings, my name is Evelyn, and I'm 31 years old. I've recently gone through a divorce, and the backstory is something I feel compelled to share with you. Let me begin by telling you how I met George, my now ex-husband. Our story started on a dating app, where we clicked almost immediately thanks to our shared interests and had great conversations over text. For our first date, we decided on a local bar, and it turned out to be a lot of fun. That night laid the foundation for many more dates to follow. We soon found ourselves seeking any excuse to spend time together, and before long, we were seriously dating. At the time, both of us were working, but my job paid significantly more. George was still living with his parents, while I owned my own home, so naturally, he spent more time at my place than I did at his. I had met his parents, Lori and Justin, a few times, and although our interactions were brief, they seemed nice. About a year and a half into our relationship, I asked George to move in with me. This was a big step for us, and it brought us even closer. The next 3 years were blissful, and when George proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding was beautiful and elegant, attended by friends and family. It was around the time of our wedding that I got to interact more with George's family. Given my demanding job, I was usually too exhausted to engage much outside of work, but George was always understanding. After the wedding, Lori invited me over for dinner at their place the following week. I thought it would be a good opportunity to spend some quality time with them, so I accepted. When we arrived, Lori and Justin welcomed me warmly. The dinner table was beautifully set, and each plate was already served. Lori insisted on a specific place for me to sit, which I found odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The dinner itself went wonderfully, and they kept expressing their gratitude for everything I was doing for George. It made me feel closer to his family. However, when I got home that evening, my stomach began to churn, and the pain quickly escalated. I felt nauseous and ended up vomiting everything I had eaten that day. George was there, holding my hair back as I got sick. At the time, I didn't suspect anything unusual. I had eaten ceviche with friends earlier and assumed that was the culprit. 5 months later, Lori and Justin invited us over again. With my busy work schedule, I hadn't had much time to visit, so I saw it as a perfect opportunity to catch up. But once again, Lori was insistent about where I should sit at the dinner table. After that evening, I returned home and once again became violently ill. This time, I started to suspect something wasn't right. I didn't want to accuse Lori without solid evidence, though, especially since George adored and respected his mother. I kept my suspicions to myself. A few months later, the same situation repeated itself. By now, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I confronted George. "We need to talk," I said. "Don't you find it strange that every time we eat at your parents' house, I get extremely sick?" George was defensive. "What are you implying?" he asked. "It's just odd," I replied. "We eat out all the time and nothing happens, but it's always at your parents' house that I get sick. Are you suggesting your mom might be tampering with the food?" His response was sharp. "If that's what you think, then fine," he said, his tone angry. "Do you have any proof?" "No," I admitted, "but how can you ignore this? I've been sick every time we've eaten there. It's hard to believe it's a coincidence." I tried to remain calm, but George wasn't having it. "My mother is the kindest person," he said, "and she would never do anything like that." We argued for hours, and in the end, he slept in the guest bedroom. I regretted the confrontation but couldn't ignore the pattern that had emerged. I grew increasingly paranoid about eating at his parents' house, convinced that something was off. To avoid drama, I began making excuses not to visit, but George's behavior started to change. After these dinners, he became distant and closed off. No matter how I tried to engage him, he seemed unresponsive. I began to suspect that he had learned the truth about what Lori had been doing to my food. Still, I couldn't avoid all their invitations, especially for significant events like Lori and Justin's anniversary or Justin's birthday, and every time, I ended up sick. After the second event, I confronted George again, but it led to another massive argument. He saw my concerns as direct accusations against his mother, and it became exhausting. I couldn't keep rationalizing this as bad luck. After the 7th occurrence, I knew it was time to take action. I couldn't trust George to help me, so I decided to investigate on my own. I bought a hidden camera disguised as a common accessory. Preparing for the next dinner, I was determined to uncover the truth once and for all. That night, I was ready, mentally and with my hidden camera in hand. I walked into George's parents' house, prepared to finally get to the bottom of what had been happening all along. I greeted them with a warm smile and offered to lend a hand in the kitchen, but Lori was adamant that I should stay out. why don't I help you with the food? I suggested, eager to be involved. Oh no, absolutely not, Lori responded quickly. But it's your birthday, why don't you relax while I handle things? I insisted, trying to lighten the atmosphere. No, you should go sit down, especially since you're our guest, she replied firmly. Nonsense, I'm your daughter-in-law, we're family, I countered, hoping to bridge the distance. Evelyn, it's okay, I have a lot to do, and I don't need any help, she said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Reluctantly, I agreed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Well, let me know if you need help with setting the dishes, or even washing them afterward. Oh yes, you can do that, she replied, then added, but first I need George's help in the kitchen. I raised an eyebrow, what could he do that I can't? Nothing, I just need him to get something heavy from the top cabinet, she explained, and without thinking, I said, alright, I'll be on the patio, but first I'll grab myself a bottle of water. Her insistence on keeping me out of the kitchen made my suspicions grow. Why did she need George's help for something I could easily do myself? I'm tall and strong, regularly working out at the gym, surely I could fetch whatever she needed from the top shelf. I didn't want to believe George was involved in whatever was happening, but his unwavering stance that nothing was wrong with the food made me wonder, was he complicit in some way? The possibility stung, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. I quickly searched for a discreet place to set up my hidden camera, hoping to capture the stove where Lori was cooking. Fortunately, Lori, George, and Justin were engrossed in their conversation, so they didn't notice my absence. I also took the opportunity to search around the kitchen. It didn't take long before I noticed something alarming. On the counter, next to the stove, was a collection of spices, and among them, an open bottle of nutmeg. I immediately tensed. I have a severe sensitivity to nutmeg. My body reacts as though it's a harmful invader, causing stomach aches, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, exactly the symptoms I've had every time I ate at their house. The sight of the open nutmeg bottle sent a surge of anger through me. I had told George about my allergy during my very first dinner at their house, so had Lori been deliberately adding it to my food, and had George known about it, yet still allowed it to happen? The betrayal cut deep. I knew I had to confront this head-on, but the camera footage would give me the proof I needed. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and grabbed a bottle of water. Then I made my way out to the patio to wait. It wasn't long before Justin came outside to join me. Seizing the opportunity, I casually tried to probe him to see if he was aware of anything strange. So, how's everything, Justin? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Not so great, he replied, my health has been a bit off. I saw a chance to share my concerns. Oh no, what's going on? I've been having some really bad stomach aches and diarrhea, I explained. It's strange, because it only happens after I eat here. I'm sorry to hear that, he said. Is there something you're allergic to? Yeah, nutmeg, but that's it, I said, watching him carefully. Well, I can assure you it's not that, Justin responded, looking puzzled. Lori despises nutmeg, so I can't imagine it being used here. Does this not happen when you eat elsewhere? He asked. No, I've tested it out, and it only occurs after eating here. I guess I'll visit the doctor if it happens again after tonight, I said, hoping to gauge his response. Do let me know if you need any help, he offered kindly, his concern seeming genuine. I nodded, appreciating his offer. It seemed like Justin was likely unaware of any deliberate wrongdoing. His demeanor was too sincere, and from past experiences, I didn't get the sense that he was involved in any of this. At least I knew Justin wasn't behind it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was still out there, hidden somewhere. I knew George wasn't capable of keeping a secret. Deception wasn't his strong suit. So, when Lori called us in for dinner, I seized the opportunity to excuse myself and retrieve the hidden camera. I moved quietly through the house, slipping into the kitchen where I had mounted the camera. With careful hands, I removed it from its discreet location, then returned to the dining table to join everyone for the meal. I resolved to endure just one more night, knowing I couldn't view the footage until I was back home. As expected, by the time I returned home, I was ill once again. The frequency of these episodes hadn't eased, and their severity was just as bad as the first time. George barely acknowledged my distress, and that only deepened my suspicions about his involvement. I waited for him to fall asleep, enduring the discomfort in silence, before I dared to extract the SD card from the camera and load it onto my laptop. My hands trembled slightly as I prepared to view the footage. The weight of what I might see loomed over me. and I wasn't sure how I'd cope if my fears were confirmed. As the video began to play, my worst fears came to life. There, on the screen, were Lori and George chatting casually as she cooked. The ease of their interaction, the way they laughed together, it all pointed to something deeply troubling. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the confirmation of their betrayal. Then, the moment I had dreaded came. I watched Lori pick up the bottle of nutmeg and add it to the stew, all while George laughed. I was shocked, heartbroken to see him so complicit in causing me pain. I had been suffering, and now it was clear they had both been part of it all along. Despite the crushing weight of this betrayal, I chose to keep my discovery a secret for the time being, maintaining the facade of normalcy while I figured out my next steps. The following day, I went straight to a lawyer's office to initiate divorce proceedings. After that, I drove to my mom's house, seeking her support as I tried to make sense of the chaos my life had become. "Hi, honey, what brings you here today? Is everything all right?" My mom greeted me, concern clouding her voice. "Hi, Mom, everything's falling apart," I confessed, the weight of it all crashing down on me. "Oh no, what happened?" she asked, clearly shocked. "I'm getting a divorce," I told her bluntly. "What? Why?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. I took a deep breath. For the past few months, every time I went to dinner at Lori and Justin's, I'd come home sick. I told George that Lori must be behind it, but he always brushed me off. "That's terrible," my mom said, her expression turning grim. "Do you think she was adding nutmeg?" "It's not just a suspicion anymore. I set up a hidden camera and caught everything on video. I saw her adding nutmeg to the food and laughing about it," I revealed, the bitterness of the betrayal flooding back. "What a horrible woman," she said, visibly upset on my behalf. "And how are you feeling now?" "I'm okay now, but I wasn't last night. That's why I'm getting a divorce." George stood by Lori while she did it and even laughed with her. "That's unforgivable." Her tone was firm, unwavering. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I'm here for you, and I'll support you through all of this." "Thanks, Mom," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I was also wondering, do you think we could do something to get back at them? "Absolutely," she said, her voice steady, though I could see the anger simmering beneath. "But first, let's have some lunch. I promise no nutmeg," she added, trying to lighten the mood with a small smile. Spending time with my mom helped calm my frayed nerves. We spent lunch talking about other things, momentarily putting aside the heavy topic of my impending divorce. Afterward, we settled on the couch, brainstorming potential ways to retaliate. Eventually, we devised a plan to tamper with Lori's food, ensuring that George would experience just a fraction of the pain he had let me endure. And when the time came, I would hand him the divorce papers, knowing that he would finally understand the hurt he had caused. I felt a strange mixture of relief and resolve. Thankfully, our finances had always been separate, and the house was in my name. George wouldn't be getting a dime from me, and I was certain he'd be moving back in with his parents. Though the idea of tampering with Lori's food initially felt satisfying, I quickly realized that a small gathering wouldn't pack the punch I was looking for. I needed a grander stage, somewhere the effects would be more dramatic. A perfect opportunity soon presented itself. My mom's 52nd birthday was just 3 weeks away. It was a milestone worth celebrating, and what better way to blend a family gathering with a little covert revenge? Plus, the thought of Lori facing public embarrassment was irresistibly tempting. That evening, I mentioned the idea to George, keeping up the appearance of normalcy. "So, my mom's birthday is coming up," I began casually. "Oh, right. Is she planning something?" George asked, completely unaware of what I was really suggesting. "Not really, I was thinking, do you think we could throw her a surprise party here? It's her 52nd after all." George seemed to think it over, then shrugged. "I don't mind, but why our place?" "I thought a surprise party would be nice, considering the milestone," I explained, keeping my tone light. "Yeah, we can do that," he agreed easily, surprising me with how quickly he went along with it. "Great. And about the guests, who do you think we should invite?" I asked. "Well, definitely your family, and see if her friends would like to join too," he suggested. "Sounds good. You know what? Invite your family too," I added, testing his response. "Are you sure? My family isn't exactly close to yours," he noted, a hint of surprise in his voice. "It's fine, we can bond them. We'll make it a big celebration," I assured him, hiding my true intentions behind a smile. Everything was falling into place. I threw myself into the party preparations. Since filing for divorce, I'd started noticing more and more things about George that irked me: his total lack of effort with the party preparations and his preference for zoning out in front of the TV. These things only solidified my decision to leave him. When the day of the party arrived, our backyard was filled with guests, all ready to surprise my mom. The evening unfolded beautifully. As dinner time approached, everything was under control. I served the food, which had already been plated, and then discreetly altered Lori's plate. Now it was just a matter of watching how the evening would unfold. I saw my opportunity when I realized that Lori didn't have any known food allergies. So, instead of simply making her uncomfortable, I decided to mix a strong laxative into her food. It would induce the same symptoms I had endured, nothing permanent, but just enough to bring some poetic justice. About half an hour after dinner, I noticed Lori shifting in her seat, her discomfort growing. She excused herself to the restroom, but fate had other plans. With 2 bathrooms in the house, I had instructed my mom to delay using hers for a few minutes while I discreetly locked the other bathroom. Lori's discomfort quickly escalated, her face drained of color, and sweat beaded on her forehead. Seizing the moment, I called out to her with feigned concern, "Lori, are you okay?" The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to her. She muttered she was fine, but just as my mom emerged from the bathroom, apologizing for taking so long to touch up her makeup, Lori's patience seemed to snap. The absurdity of the situation, her suffering over something so minor, was comical, and the room couldn't help but chuckle. The laughter died abruptly, though, when unmistakable sounds echoed from the bathroom. The room fell eerily silent. Lori finally emerged, her face flushed with embarrassment, and the crowd burst into laughter. Lori stormed up to me, her finger jabbing into my chest. "You did this," she hissed. "What do you mean?" I feigned innocence. "I know you messed with my food," she snapped. I remained calm. "Oh, Lori, I really don't think so." "Then why am I the only one with an upset stomach?" "Wait, was this why you asked me to invite my family too, so you could mess with my mom?" she accused. I turned to George, who had been silent up until this point. He interjected, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "This has gone too far. You're hurting my mother." "What suspicion are you talking about?" I asked, playing along. "You know," he said, looking at me like I was the crazy one, "that silly one about my mom messing with your food every time we go to my parents' house." I couldn't resist. "Oh, you mean like this?" I said, and with that, I sent the video from the hidden camera to every guest's phone. The pings of incoming messages coincided with the video reaching both George and Lori. As the footage played, the room went silent. It showed Lori adding something to the stew while she and George laughed. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, so it was just a silly doubt. "George?" I asked, letting the reality of the situation sink in for everyone. "You know what's in that bottle?" "Nutmeg. You know how bad my allergies are. And yet you stood by while Lori did this." George stammered, his face a mixture of shock and desperation. "I swear it's not what you think." "I don't see any other explanation," I replied, my patience gone. "I can't stand this anymore." I handed him the divorce papers. "Get out of my house and my life." "No, don't do that." Lori stepped forward, her voice defensive. "George is innocent. I did it because I never liked you," she admitted, her tone full of venom, "and I knew George would never say a word against me." Hearing this was a bitter pill to swallow, but I didn't hesitate. "That's even worse. If my husband can't stand up for me against his mother, he doesn't deserve to be my husband. You're lucky all I'm doing is this. I could have pressed charges, but I'll let it go if you both just leave quietly." And with that, Lori and George left without another word. Justin lingered behind, his expression somber. He apologized for everything that had transpired, but I reassured him that he wasn't at fault and had nothing to apologize for. I even asked him to stay and continue the celebration with us, but it was clear that Lori and George's actions had severely damaged their standing within the family. Now, my divorce is final, and I am officially a free woman. The whole ordeal will take time to process, but I stood strong through the storm. The quiet that follows feels heavy, and while I will miss the companionship I once had with George, I know I'm strong enough to move past it and find happiness again. As for my mom, she was thrilled with how everything turned out. To celebrate her milestone birthday and thank her for her unwavering support, I took her out to a fancy restaurant. It was a lovely day, a bright spot after a tumultuous time, and a reminder of the strong support system I have in my life.